Okay, Boker Tov, Shavuot to everybody. Hope everybody had a meaningful Tisha B'Av. Now people can have fun in the summer, right? Once Tisha B'Av ends, so you can enjoy yourself without any guilty feelings. So, anyways, we should have good news. We share good news from Israel, from here, from all around, and enjoy. And of course, we continue pretty much every day. We don't have Benas Manim, unlike everybody else, right? Rabbi Leibtag, as you're saying. So, Baruch Hashem, programs, and then hopefully we'll pick up even more in Elul, increase the pace of the programming, but everybody enjoy. And Rabbi Leibtag, Vakasha.
Okay. because it's Benas Manim, I'm going to slow my pace a little bit and do more. I want to leave Sefer Shmuel itself for Rosh Chodesh Elul. We're going to do it Sefer Shmuel, but I'm going to do it at a relatively slow pace because I'm assuming a lot of people are on vacation. So we'll do some side topics related to Shmuel, and we can be a little more relaxed. I'll try to slow down a little bit. And I still owe you Tilim Kuf Zayin, which maybe I'll get to today finally. Okay, so let me share my screen. Here we are. Today is class number 13 in our series on the early prophets. And we're doing Sefer Shmuel. It's prophetic purpose. And today we'll talk about who Shmuel was. Was he a Levite, a Kohen, a Shofet, or a Navi? So before we start, just for the fun of it, why would someone think, let me stop the share for a minute. If you only read the first line of Sefer Shmuel, let's take a look at it real fast. Let's just open up Sefer Shmuel real fast. Chapter 1, verse 1. From the opening line, what tribe would you say Shmuel was from? Vayish Echad min Aramatayim Sofim Mahar Ephraim, Shmuel Kana ben Yerucham ben Elihu ben Tochu ben Sup ben Ephrati. What would the average reader think?
Ephraim.
He's from Ephraim. Why? Because it says so, right? He's from living in Har Ephraim. He's an Ephrati, so of course he's from Har Ephraim. But I'll show you something similar. Here in Sefer Shmuel. Here we go. Yeah, there's Ishachad from Har Ephraim. That's fine. Here. Vahi Narmi Beit Lechem Yehuda, Mishpachat Yehuda, V'hu Levi. So you can, someone from Beit Lechem can be a Levite. So the fact you're called from Ephraim doesn't mean you're necessarily from Ephraim, because you might be a Levi. So we're going to see. Did anyone know that Shmuel was a Levite? That would be our first topic. We'll prove to you that he was a Levite. Now that anyone know whose great grandfather was? Great grandfather.
Korach?
Yeah, Korach. We'll prove that today. And we'll see, it's not just a genealogical connection. There's a very deep thematic connection between Korach and Shmuel. They're both big reformers. They reformed the political system. They reformed the priesthood. And there's something thematically that Korach relates to Shmuel. If you ever read Tehillim, there's Bnei Korach. Remember, there's the famous line in Chumash of Bnei Korach lo metu. We know that too well. Korach's descendants is people like Korach, the sons of Korach. So there's the genealogical sons of Korach, and then there's the people like Korach who start complaining and start machloket. So that's always used out of context a lot, but in a good sense. Okay, so now we know he could be a Levi, not just from Ephraim. Why would you call him a Shofet? Any reason to call him a Shofet? Tell me why he shouldn't be a Shofet. He's not in Sefer Shoftim, is he?
All right, he's a Navi.
Yeah, and he is a Navi because he's called Shmuel HaNavi, right? In fact, we know his tomb. Remember, it's the tomb of Samuel the prophet. And if you've been on the tomb, so he must be a Navi because Shmuel HaNavi. But if he's not in Sefer Shoftim, the question is he a Shofet? That's a good question, and he's definitely a prophet. I'm sure he's the prophet. So what was the title? Did we cover them all? A Kohen, a Levi, a Shofet, or a Navi? Okay.
Well,
yeah, question. Go ahead.
He ruled L-R-U-L-E-S. So I don't think any other Navi rules.
Okay, so we're going to see that. We're going to see how, if he's called a Shofet and what it means, the fact he's called a Shofet. It'll be
But
really
he's
important to
called-
understand
he's
Sefer
called
Shoftim.
also Ro'eh. He's called also Haro'eh. He's
So
the
let me
only
see,
one.
He's Shmuel, but he's called that in I'm pretty sure he's called that in he's called that also. That's right. He's called that in Shmuel by the women or by the people in the city, Ramah, and also he's called that in Divrei Yamim. Shmuel Ro'eh and Natan Navi and Gad Jose, when each one's giving their names. Okay. That's the question, what that referring to. Okay, so let's get to work. That was a little stall. We're going to go back to the chat and share the source sheet one more time, and now we'll get started. So let me share my screen, and I'll give my little introduction for today. So today I want to differentiate between the book of Shmuel and the prophet Shmuel. I'll explain what I mean. In our class about a month ago, when I gave my first introductory class on Shmuel, before we got sidetracked to the 3 weeks in the Churban topics, I tried to explain that the book of Shmuel has to be a later work, composed or redacted by a later Navi with a prophetic purpose. We began to discuss its prophetic purpose, but it's selectively quoting from 3 existing works, not existing in our time, but existing in the author's time. There was a collection of the Nevuot of the Navi Shmuel. There was a collection of the works of the Navi Gad and of the Navi Natan. Nowadays, we don't have any of those 3 books, but at the fingertips of the author of our Sefer Shmuel, those 3 books existed, and our author's quoting selectively from those books for the need of his book, which we call Sefer Shmuel. Now, we're going to try to identify the different units, the different subsections in our Sefer Shmuel, and try to identify which Navi is associated with each section. And then I have to ask myself, what's the original intention of that section? And then I have to ask myself, why is this being quoted in our book? I'm going to repeat that because that's going to be our methodology. I'm going to identify different sections, different subunits in Sefer Shmuel. They'll be really easy to identify. I'll ask myself, who most likely is the author of that original section, and try to understand what its prophetic point was. Then later we have to talk about why did our Sefer Shmuel, why did the prophetic author of our Sefer Shmuel, why is he including this existing section in his work? Got that? So I'll give you an example. Remember we talked about we need to clarify once and for all that David was anointed by God, and God wanted David to start his kingdom, and his monarchy is what God wanted. So if Shmuel is a Navi who is going to anoint David and make them and tell everyone that David is king forever and unanoint Shaul, I need to know first of all that Shmuel is a bona fide Navi. So I'll show you today that one of the key underlying points of our section today is the legitimacy of Shmuel the Navi. Maybe legitimacy, there's a better word. Not the Torah. Give me a better word than legitimacy. I want to know that he's authentic, that he's an authoritative Navi that everyone accepted. Okay? And then, therefore, if Shmuel says something, I need to accept it. It's important before I talk about how the kingdom developed, I need to know that Shmuel was a Navi that everyone accepted. And that'll be one of the underlying themes of today's section, but have other themes as well. Okay. So today we're going to focus on chapters 1 through 7 to show how they form a unit, and then we'll discuss what's going on in the book. I'm going to work backwards for a minute, just to make my point about a unit clear. I'm going to look at the end of chapter 7 and the beginning of chapter 8. Okay, I'm going to stop this share and open up a Tanakh. I want to show you the contrast from the end of chapter 7 in Shmuel to the beginning of chapter 8. Let's look at the end of chapter 7, or are we? Sefer Shmuel. What happened here? Here we go. 1 Samuel. If I go to the book begins, we read the first line of the book. At the end of chapter 7, the last 2-3 lines, okay, I want to show you, and we'll return to this later on, that this clearly ends a unit. But here we're told, I'll make it nice and big. This is the end of chapter 7. Vayishpot Shmuel et Yisrael kol yemei chayav. Well, now we prove that he's a shofet, right? Now, what's it mean he was shofet? Then we have to talk about. We'll talk about it later in the shir. But if we're going to call Shmuel shofet, this is a good proof that he's a shofet. Then the question is, why is he not in Sefer Shoftim? We're going to see later on that Shmuel is actually the first shofet who's really a shofet. Of all the shoftim, he's the real shofet. But we'll talk about that when we get to chapter 7 in detail. Then we're told, V'alach midei shana b'shana, v'sava Beit El Gilgal v'mitzpah. He made the rounds. He took leadership, but he made the rounds from different places in his area. And he judged Israel in those places. V'shavat Yisrael b'chol makom ha'te'ela. In these different places, he went from place to place to judge the people. Utshuvo ha'ramata, at the end of his rounds, he returned to his home in Ramah in Har Ephraim, Kisham Beito, that's where his home was. And he also judged Israel there from Ramah. And Vayiven Sham Mizbeach L'Hashem. Who else in Tanakh builds a Mizbeach for God in that wording? Any other character in Tanakh who does that?
Abraham.
Yeah, Avram Avinu in the beginning. And Yitzchak once, 3 times by Avram Avinu, 3 or 4 times by Avram Avinu. Okay? And I'm pretty sure no other individual is described in that manner other than our forefather Avram Avinu and Shmuel. Can you think of anybody else? It could be he did it, but it's almost in a defining sentence about the person. So the fact that we're taking a phrase from Avram's career, a key phrase from Avram's career, and Am Yisrael being chosen, and having that at this key point in Sefer Shmuel, I think we'll discuss it later on. I think that's important, at least thematically. Now, that's the end of chapter 7. Look how chapter 8 begins. Vayik Hasher Zaken Shmuel. V'esabadav Shoftim, and all of Israel gathers together and remind Shmuel, you're getting old, atazakanta, okay? And your sons are off the derech, and now they ask for a king. Okay, that'll be a big topic. What I want to show you, chapter 8 starts a new unit. The topic is no longer the career of Shmuel. The topic is asking for a king. And asking for a king will be a big topic in Sefer Shmuel because the kingdom is going to be established. But my point is, we're going to identify a unit later on that starts in chapter 8, where the focus of that topic is appointing a king and the process of appointing a king and establishing a monarchy, whether God wants it, whether he doesn't want it, good or bad. When we study that, we'll have to go back to our study of Sefer Shoftim. But if I go back now to the end of chapter 7, the fact that chapter 8 begins at the end of Shmuel's career, when the people are asking for a king and reminding Shmuel he's getting old, it's time for a successor, that highlights even more that the end of chapter 7 is a summary. And therefore, these psukim is a summary of the career of Shmuel. And therefore, because chapter 1 begins with the birth of Shmuel, chapters ends with the summary of his career, and therefore chapters 1 through 7 will be a distinct prophetic unit. Hope that's clear. Trying to keep it nice and simple, following the methodology. And now we've proven that Shmuel is a shofet. Later we'll talk about why he's called a shofet and how that might help us understand the book that we call Sefer Shoftim. And other people will call it a shofet who don't exactly judge the people, but Shmuel is a navi, is a shofet, and a navi who judges the people, and we'll talk about how important that's going to be. Now let's go back to our source sheet, stop the share, and I want to show you that Shmuel is a Levi. How do we know? We have the book of Divrei Yamin. It's really interesting that the book of Shmuel never mentions this. Either assumes you know that. Again, when you read the first line of Sefer Shmuel, you think he's from Ephraim. But there's no doubt when you read Divrei Yamin, you can't miss that he's from Shevet Levi. And now we'll do the boring part. We're going to share our screen and go to our source sheet. Shmuel's genealogy in Divrei Yamin, chapter 6. We talk about the offspring of Levi, the 3 sons of Levi, Gershon, Kat, and Merari. In this context, we find out about Shmuel. We don't get all the descendants, but we follow several lines. We find the Davidic line from Yehuda. We're going to follow the Kohanim line in Divrei Yamin, and we're going to follow certain lines of the Levites. Okay, listen carefully. And this relates a lot to Divrei Yamin because Divrei Yamin later on is going to focus on all the efforts King David does to build up the Mikdash. But listen carefully. Ve'ele asher hamid David ayidei shir Beit Hashem mimanoach Aaron. From the time the Aaron reached its final resting place, we'll see this psukim soon. That's in chapter 16 in Divrei Yamin. When David brings the Aaron to Yerushalayim and later wants to build a house for God, God tells him, wait till later. But when David brought the Aron to Yerushalayim, David established a choir. Okay? And the members of that choir, we'll see, are going to be listed here from the different sons of Levi. So, Bashir, who are the people who were serving in front of the Mishkan in singing? Meaning, who was the choir that David established when he brought their own to Yerushalayim to centralize Yerushalayim and make it a place of gathering where they're singing and praising of God? Ad benot Shlomo Beit Hashem b'Yerushalayim, until Shlomo built the house for God, we had a choir of Levim near David with the Aron. Okay, this will be detailed much later on in Divrei Yamim about the 24 mishmorot of the Kohanim and Levim that David set up. Okay, these are the ones who stood in this choir. And where are they from? We're going to see from Kahat, and we'll see some from Gershon. So from the offspring of Kahat, who's in the choir? Heman Hamshorer. Heman comes up in Tilim several times. But Heman, Ben Yoel, Ben Shmuel. Okay? Now, is this our Shmuel? Or did Shmuel have a son named Yoel? Anyone know or not? What are we told about? Does anyone know where in Sefer Shmuel we have Shmuel's sons?
The beginning of chapter 8.
Exactly. We just read it. I mean, we didn't read it, but we're in chapter 8. I'll stop the share. In the beginning of chapter 8, we have the classic problem that when you're dedicating your life to education, there's a good chance your kids move off the derech. It's a little nechama for people in education. Chazal says to make sure people don't think the Torah is the Yerusha. Moshe Rabbeinu, remember, didn't have much success with his kids. We saw that in Pesach Mecha. But notice, Vayikasher Zaken Shmuel v'yasemed banav shoftim. I've heard of that the chief rabbi appoints his children to be judges. Either way, though, Vayishem b'noah b'chor Yoel. Here you go. V'shem Mishneh Aviyah. So he has two sons, Yoel and Aviyah. We'll see if that matches in a minute. Shoftim b'Beersheva, but unfortunately, lo huchu banav b'drachav. V'yitu achrei abatza v'yichu shochad v'yitu mishpat. Unheard of later in Jewish history, but a rabbi appoints his children to continue the chief rabbinate, and they follow planetary corruption. So at least there's a precedent. Now, but it's interesting that his son Yoel, even though he was corrupt and didn't continue in his father's ways, Shmuel's grandson, Yoel's son, made it to the choir. Maybe he had protexia. So remember, Shmuel had a son named Yoel. Let's go back to Divrei Yamim and see if it matches. Back to our source sheet. Here we go. So we have Ubneim Heman, the Meshorer, he's the composer, the son of Yoel, here we go, the son of Shmuel, the son of Elkanah, the son of Yerocham, Ben Eliel Ben Toach, Ben Suf. So we're pretty close now, right? Let's take a look at the first line of Sefer Shmuel. Where's the first line of Sefer Shmuel? Here. There's a man from the times of him, Elkanah, Ben Yerocham, Ben Elihu, Ben Tochu, Ben Suf. Let's see if that mentions. Remember, just memorize it now. Shmuel, Ben Elkanah, Yerocham, Elihu, Tochu, and Suf. Keep that. Right? Let's see what happened in Divrei Yamim. We have Shmuel, Ben Elkanah, there's one. Ben Yerocham, 2 for 2. Instead of Elihu, Eliel. That's not bad, is it? Because the God's name could be El or Hu. Remember, either Yud Hey, or remember, there's Yehoyakim, Eliakim, right? Eliel, Elihu. That's close enough. And Toach we have, and Suf. And Tochu, Toach. So it really matches pretty good. For Tanakh, that's for Divrei Yamim matching other books. That's pretty. That's about as close as you're ever going to get. And then we don't stop here. We go Ben Elkanah. So it's a name in the family. Okay. Ben Machad, Ben Amitzai, Ben Elkanah. Here, Elkanah again. Ben Yoel. Here we go. Another name. It's these family names. It's not like modern day Israelis who come up with these new names for their children. But this is the old Jewish tradition. You name people after their great-grandparents. Ben Azariah, Ben Sfanya, Ben Tachat, Ben Asir, Ben Eviasap, Ben Korach, Ben Yitzhar, Ben Kad, Ben Levi, Ben Yisrael. I forgot to get how many generations, but I'm assuming it's, someone can count later on. But it's the same, I think it's 22, somewhere between 22 and 24, I think, from the time of Yitzhak Mitzrayim, from the time of Breshit. Someone counted later on, but it's very similar to the amount of generations in when they follow the Kohanim. But again, we have a very good match, and now we know that Shmuel, the famous Shmuel, is a great grandson of Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kap ben Levi. But there's no doubt of his yichus now. Now it's interesting that his cousin, Achiv ben means his cousin. Haman was one Mishorer, and now we have a cousin. Ach can mean a cousin. Asaph, from who? Omed al Yimino. Asaph is from where? Asaph ben Brachael ben Shmaya ben Michael ben Basa ben Matniah ben Zerach, etc. Ben Gershon ben Levi. So the two key Levites organizing the choir in the time of King David are Haman, Shmuel's grandson, is Enochel, right? And Asaph from Gershon. Tomorrow's Monday. Tuesday morning, we're going to Mizmor LaAsaph, remember? Elim Mitzah Baratel. Mizmor LaAsaph comes up a lot. There's a whole set of Mizmor LaAsaph in Tehillim. There's Mizmor B'nai Korach, aren't there? Remember, there's B'nai Korach. There's tons of Mizmor B'nai Korach. This is a family. But Haman was probably the Kibbutz Shorer of B'nai Korach. And Asaph, he's from a different family. He's from Gershon. But they're all from Levi. Now, why are they mentioned? Because David is going to appoint a choir. We'll see that soon. Remember in Divrei Yamim, when David brings Aaron to Yerushalayim, this is from Divrei Yamim chapter 16. Vayten litnei Aaron Hashem min haLevim mishartim, laskir lodot la'alel l'Hashem Eloi Yisrael, Asaph haRosh. So the key composer of Tehillim at the time of David, remember, ask who wrote Tehillim. There's so many prakim associated with Asaph and B'nai Korach. I mean, David starts the ball rolling and he commissions it, but he appoints other people, and they're also composers. Asaph HaRosh, is that Mishneh Zechariah, Yel, there's a whole bunch of names here in their whole thing, and the people with all the different instruments. And then there's the Kohanim with the Chatzotzrot, right, with the bugles, the trumpets, in front of the Aaron. And Bayamahu, Az Natan David, Barosh Lodot Lashem Biad Asaph Echav. Asaph and his brothers means his cousins, tribe of Levi. And in this parak, they sing Hodu Lashem Kriu Bishmo, but we daven every morning in Psukei Zimra, Hodu, either before or after Baruch Shamar. We're quoting from Divrei Yamim, when David brought the road to Yerushalayim. That's a separate topic. Okay, so what have we established? Shmuel as a Levite with Yichus and the great-great-grandson of Korach, who complained about political leadership, remember? Complained about the Kohuna. And guess what? Shmuel was going to reform the Kohuna, who's corrupt. He's going to reform the political system. And now the question is Shmuel a Levite or maybe even a Kohen? Did Shmuel become a Kohen? Almost. We'll see if it's possible. Now, was he from Ephraim or from Levi? So we read this already, but Shmuel, in the first time from Sefer Shmuel, sounds like he's from Ephraim. Okay. But now we saw that he's living in Ephraim because he's in Har Ephraim, but he's from Shevet Levi. What do we know? We learned that a couple 2 weeks ago in Parshat Maseh, that every tribe had to give cities to Shevet Levi. So the tribe of Ephraim gave one of the cities that Levim were allowed to live in and set aside for them was Ramatayim Sofim in Har Ephraim. Okay? And therefore, Elkanah is from Ramatayim Sofim, which happens to be a day's walk, a short distance from Shiloh. Okay? If you want to wonder why Elkanah is visiting Shiloh so often, right? He's a Levite. So he's in education. You should go there. And it makes sense he goes there on a regular basis. And then last week we talked about the contrast, or 2 weeks ago, last week we did, the contrast between Bnei Eli who are corrupt and Shmuel is going to fix them. That's what we saw, just review what we saw last week. Okay. Elkanah went home after Shmuel was born. And Bnei Eli were Bnei Belial lo yadu et Hashem, and that got us on track. What does it mean to know God? Doing tzedek and mishpat. We did a whole shir on that before. That was the theme of why the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. And in contrast to Shmuel, the chatat of the Na'arim. Now, the Na'arim we're talking about are Chofni and Pinchas. Why they're called Na'arim we have to talk about? Because they're not so young. Okay? Pnei Hashem. Okay? Shmuel Pnei Hashem. We'll talk about the word Nar. We'll talk about this soon. Shmuel was Masrei Pnei Hashem. Nar chagur ephod bad. Whoa. What was Shmuel wearing? He's wearing an ephod. An ephod is a beged kuna. And he's a nar. What's it mean he's a nar? We'll talk about that soon as well. Okay? V'anar Shmuel, holech v'gadel v'tov, gam im Hashem gam im Menachem. That was a contrast. We had now that in contrast to Bnei Eli who are corrupt, Shmuel, he grows more and more popular. He's good with God and with people. Remember, that's a big cloud when you want, if you're in the rabbinate or in Jewish education, you have to be a good connection to God. You have to have a good connection to people, act in a way that God appreciates, and act in a way that people appreciate. Now, I would say halachically he's a Kohen, but maybe functionally he's a Kohen, because a Kohen is someone representing God. Now, I'm going to go back down to chapter 1 and pretty much start the book and talk about how the book begins. Everyone knows the story of Elkanah and his two wives, and Penina and Hannah. That's a topic for Rosh Hashanah. How Elkanah, did he say the right thing? If you want an example, what not to say to your wife, or what not to say to someone when they don't feel good, that's a good lesson. What not to say. But everyone knows the story. I want to make one point about the story that's important. If I'm looking at Jewish history, I think we talked about this earlier. The end of Sefer Shoftim, we've reached rock bottom as far as our political state of the people ever since we came out of Egypt, ever since we conquered Canaan in the time of Yeshua. Things are getting politically worse. Our borders are shrinking. Our economics we'll see is bad. And the society, we saw the corruption of society. We saw in those three stories in the end of Sefer Shoftim, how terrible the people are acting, a terrible civil war, the way people are talking to each other, the way they're acting, everything's a disaster. And within 50 years, we're going to reach almost a high point in Jewish history with King David, with David's kingdom and his dynasty, and bring the Aron to Yerushalayim, and David doing Tzedek and Mishpat, and getting the Beit HaMikdash ready. And if I'm looking, what's the turnaround moment in Jewish history where we were rock bottom, and 50 years things get better? It all begins not just with Shmuel, but with Tfilat Chana. It's interesting that the turnaround moment in Chana's life, which is her Tfilah, becomes a turnaround moment in Jewish history. Which I think tells you a lot about Tfilah. There's a good reason why Chazal learned Tfilah from Chana. Now, Chana has a child, Pasachaf. Vayid tkuvat hayamim, vatar Chana vateled ben, vatikra Shmuel Shmuel ki mi'Hashem shiltiv. Look at that pasuk. Someone tell me what's wrong with the name.
His name should be Shaul.
Right.
Right, that should be. Isn't that clear? His name should be. Now, is Shaul and Shmuel ever mixed up with each other? Well, ask the Balatov later on. And that's like, if you remember that story, it's like, it's such a classic. I'll just jump to it because we have time today because it's Ben Azmanim. If you remember, that should be chapter 28 in Shmuel Aleph, I think. It just came to mind now, so I didn't put it on the source sheet. But if remember the Balat Ov, remember the witch in Endor? Endor is where she's from, I think, isn't she? Yeah. Shmuel goes to it's after Shmuel died.
No, Shaul. Shaul goes.
Like both Shmuel and Gilboa. Okay. Here. Shaul goes to Balat Ov. Yeah, sure. Shmuel goes. Because I want to find a Balat Ov, and I'll go and find out what's going to be because he's worried about what's going to be in the battle. People used to go to prophets to ask what's going to be for the battle. Okay, so a little trivia for some people my age. It's called the witch. Yeah, it's called you've heard of the witch of Endor, but if you remember Bewitched, this shouldn't be on tape, but
Endora.
Remember Endora?
Endora.
That was Samantha. That was her mother. Your mother, right? So that's her name was Endora because of this. I don't know if you knew that trivia, but that's where it's from. Anyway, back to Shir. Anyway, so they go the whole thing and bring up thing, and what happens? Okay. But Tomar Isha, the Pasuk says, "Edmi alelach v'yemer et Shmuel halili." Okay. Bring up Shmuel from the dead. Okay. Vatera ha'isha et Shmuel, vatizak b'kol gadol, v'tomar Isha el Shaul lemor, lamritani v'ata Shaul. Not it? Right? she sees Shmuel, and then she realizes that you're Shaul. How does, okay? And then without going to the parak there, but you see already a connection. I mean, at the end of his life, you see this deep connection between Shmuel and Shaul. We'll see later on that Shmuel really wanted Shaul to be successful, but it's really almost ironic that Shmuel's name technically should have been Shaul, but it's Shmuel. So someone tell me, why is it Shmuel? Why is Shmuel a better name? What else could Shmuel imply?
Samael.
That God heard. Now there's no ayin in the name.
Anna.
Yeah. But God answered her prayer. God heard her prayer. But what did she do? She lent him, she gave him a loan, she returned him to God. So that's why Shaul was nice, because Shmuel was lent to God. After he was born, there was Chana sees Shmuel as belonging to God. So therefore, he's on loan to God for the rest of his life from his mother. Anyway, so that was the topic there. Let me stop the share and go back to. So now what have we established? That Shmuel, we're back to our source sheet. His name should have been Shaul. That's where we're reading the parak. Here we are. Here we are. Okay. So Shmuel Kimi Hashem Shiltiv. Okay. And Chana stayed home until he grew up, until she was ready to walk and go to work. Okay, and so she takes care of the baby, and then finally, after he's old enough to be brought to the Mishkan, we don't know exactly the age, but he's young. Batalehu ima kasher gemalatu, right? When he's weaned already, I think he's more than 3 though, but he's old enough to learn alabait. He's old enough to start working, right? But for him, she brings a present, sacrifice to God, probably a shlamim. But Tevio Beit Hashem, okay, Shiloh, she goes to the God's house in Shiloh. V'hanar na'ar. Now, tell me how most people understand this pasuk, v'hanar na'ar. See that line? Let's see how they translate this in English. And I have it over here. It says, and the child was young. Just call him a nar, right? Now, does anyone know of a nar who's not young, who's called a nar in Chumash?
Yehoshua.
Yeah. Why is Yeshua called a nar? Not because he's young, he's not a teenager. He's an apprentice. Now, someone learning to become a Navi is an apprentice. Okay? Someone learning to become a rotten adult is called a teenager. I'm joking. You know what they call a teenager in Hebrew? What age is it called? Tipeshesre. Never heard that? You can't translate that.
Yirmiyahu was also a Na'ar.
What?
Yirmiyahu was also a Na'ar.
That's what we're going to get to. But when it says Yirmiyahu, how do we know Yirmiyahu is a Nar? How do we know Yirmiyahu is a Nar?
He says so in terms of the election.
Not Tanakh, he says so. Now, why is he telling God? God's giving him a nevuah. God wants to give him a job. And what's Yirmiyahu say? I don't have smicha. That's what he says. He says, I'm an apprentice. He's telling God, I'm not ready. A nar is someone learning to become a navi. Yoshua ben Nun nar, he's in training. He's Moshe's partner, but he's in training. He later will he'll take over from Moshe later on. But someone in training, an apprentice, can be called a nar. Got it? And therefore, someone learning to become a nar, I think there were 15 narim in Beit El, remember? Who are B'nai Nevi'im. Later they're called Yiladim, Narim. That's wordplay, and that's the beginning of Malachim Bet, when Elisha returns. But someone learning to become a Navi can be called a Nar.
What's the difference between that and B'nai Nevi'im?
Yeah, but he's also in training. So I think when it says V'hanar Nar means the trainee, right, was young. Often a Nar is definitely a teenager or a young boy. Got it? A nar for sure means a lad. So when you're an adolescent learning to get older, when you're learning to become an adult, you're called a nar. A nar is a name for a young child or a teenager before adulthood. But I think anar nar doesn't mean the child was young. It means the apprentice, in other words, this young boy was already learning smicha. Got it? Or learning was in prophet school. Anar means learning to become a navi. It was also a nar, he was young. Because usually you have to be older to become a nar. A nar navi, you have to be older. So this nar navi was only a nar. Got my point? I think that's Pshat about nar. Now, when Yirmiyahu tells God, Nar Anochi, saying, I'm not ready yet to be a navi. What's God show him? Yes, you can. He says, what do you see? He gives him a vision and he sees it. What's God prove to Yirmiyahu? You are a navi. Yirmiyahu thought he wasn't qualified yet, and God says you are qualified. So that way, I think when Yirmiyahu says he's a nar, doesn't mean he's young, doesn't mean doesn't mean he's a teenager. It means he's in training. He doesn't think he's ready yet.
So if he wears the ephod, is he a Kohen in training?
Now, did anyone else ever put on an ephod to
Micha.
become a Kohen?
Micha.
Ah, very good. Are there any other parallels between the stories at the end of Sefer Shoftim and Shmuel? Anyone ever become a Nazir from birth? Right? With the story about his mother and his strange story of his mother and her father and the whole thing?
Shimshon.
Yeah. That's Shimshon. And the story of the Ish Levi. Oh, right. Remember the Ish Levi from, let's take a look at it here. As long as you mentioned it, let's take a look at that story. That's going to be chapter 17, I think, and Sefer Shoftim. Let's open up the Tanakh. Sefer Shoftim. Judges, here we go. I think it's chapter 17. Here we go, okay? Here. Yeah, Vahinan mi Beit Lechem Yehuda, Mishpachet Yehuda. Remember, first we had the guy Micha, who stole money from his mother and donated the money to Beit. We talked about that in detail when we did Sefer Shoftim. Okay? So there's not Beit Lechem Yehuda. Make it bigger, real fast. Made it bigger, okay? There's not Beit Lechem Yehuda, Mishpachet Yehuda, Behu Levi, Hu Garsham. You see my screen? We're okay? We're in Sefer Shmuel. Sefer Shoftim, chapter 17. So we see that Levites, hang out in Har Ephraim is nothing new. You see the parallel though? A Nar Levi in Har Ephraim. Okay. V'yomer lo Micha, me'ayin tavo, v'yomer lav Levi anochi, miBeit Lechem Yehuda, v'anochi olech lagor b'asher yimtza. Okay. V'yomer lo Micha, shva imadi, ve'en li la'av u'lechohen. See right? What do we find? A Levi can become a Kohen. Got it? So he gives him, he has a contract. Right. Okay. And by Malay Michat Yara Levi, Veilo Anar Lechohen. Okay. Remember, Micha says, Atayadati ki tiva shemli, Hayali Levi Lechohen. But what word am I looking for? I'm looking for an ephod, aren't I?
Yeah.
What do we have in ephod? Look at the next parak. When they come, the Bnei Dan come and steal everything. Listen what they tell him. What did they say? Here. Vaynu chameshtet anashim ha'ochim l'ragel et eretz laish. Vayamru alachem. Hayedatem. We're in chapter 18, verse 14. Hayedatem ki yesh babatim me'ele ephod u'trofim u'peso masecha v'atadu masatu. They assume Shem Beit Hanar Levi Beit Micha, remember? And they go there, and then they come up there, and what they do? In Baushama, Luchu et HaPesel, v'et HaEphod, v'et HaTrofim, v'et HaMasecha, v'HaKohen, Nitzah Petach Hashar. Who's the Kohen? The Levi. Right? And he has an ephod. So I'm not sure if it's it seems like the ephod goes together with this Kohen. Because in the Mishkan, and if we know there's an ephod there as well, with this Levi is a Kohen. So the fact his mother, let's go back to our Psukim in Sefer Shmuel. Where are we? The fact that his mother, what's his mother do? Here, I'm sorry, but now we said Nar. So the Nar was Nar, okay, they bring the par, etc. So Chana tells Eli, Elanar Zayt Palati, V'ten Hashem li et shelati asher shalti mimo, Kamichi shaltiu l'Hashem kol yamim asher haya Shaul Hashem, v'ashteru Sham l'Hashem. So he's explaining why his name is Shmuel, but Shaul, got it? Who's Shaul Hashem? Again, a proof that his name implies Shaul. Like you said.
Can I say something about the Na'ar? With in Shmot we read about Moshe that she looked and she said, ותראה את הילד והנה נער בוכה.
Very good. And really, he's really a Yeved, right? But he's not a Nar yet, is he?
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
But he's destined to become great. So it's very good. That might explain why he's called a Nar, even though he's a
right. ותראה את
very,
הילד
very good.
והנה נער בוכה. Yeah.
Because it should be a Yeled Boche. And it's called a Yeled later, remember? Because give me the Yeled, I'll bring it to its mother and I'll nurse her. It's not, the baby's not weaned yet. It needs to be nursed. It's like it's a newborn. So very good point. Why he's called a Nar is very
yes,
thematically deep. Very good point.
Also, the Nekudot under Na'ar is a Patach, and the second Na'ar is Kamatz Patach, which is a Mikzoa.
Very good also. So the Nikud supports it. Very good. What's it called? Yeshua ben Nun Na'ar is what they take a look at. What's the Nikud by Yeshua ben Nun? We'll take a look. That's going to be chapter 33 in Shemot, maybe. Let's see how our memory's doing. We'll go to Sefer Shemot, chapter 33. Okay, Yeshua ben Nun Na'ar. So here he's called with Patach. Does that match? I can go either way, but that's the Na'ar there. Okay. Let's go back to our regular source sheet. And we're here. Okay, now, what happened? Ushmo Mesharet et Pnei Hashem in chapter 2. Nar Chagur Ephod Bad. Here we go. Now we know that he was a Nar Chagur Ephod Bad. Umil Katan Tasel Limo, he has a male as well. His mother made for him. And we compared it to chapter 17 in Sefer Shoftim with the wandering Levite. So now if he's a Kohen, what's it mean if he's a Kohen? Well, is there a Mishkan now or not in the time of Shmuel? Well, there's a Mishkan in Shiloh, but it's going to be destroyed soon. But when there's Heter Bamot, who can bring korbanot? According to Chazal, anyone can bring korbanot. A Bama, a Bechor, I think for sure can bring korbanot by a Bama. But I don't think if he's called a Kohen, it's because he's representing God. That's the main thing. Someone remember a Kohen is someone in the service of a God. And if I wanted a better proof, tell me, we just started the book. In Sefer Devarim, what's the name of Shevet Levi? Okay, they're called Kohanim HaLevim. Shevet Levi, sometimes it's called Levim, sometimes it's called Kohanim. Bechahen means I'm in service. A Levi is my tribe. A Levi who's teaching Torah, or a Levi who's doing his job in the Mishkan, he's Mechahen. So don't be surprised that I can call Levim Kohanim. Now, within Shevet Levi, there's specific Kohanim. That may have been a later decision after Chet Ego, after Korach. That could be argued when that changed. That's a whole topic about Shevet Levi, when they got their job. In fact, we're going to have it in Parshat Ekev, I think. Yeah, Beiti, if Shevet Levi, we're going to have this week in Parshat Ekev. Maybe if we had time, I could look at that. But the calling a someone from the tribe of Levi, calling him a Kohen, means he's representing God. Doesn't mean he's halachically a Kohen already. Now, back to, let me check the chat real fast, and then we'll continue. Joseph was 17. Okay. I'm sorry. Yosef was a Nar because he was a 17. That's the perfect age. But it's really cool. He's called Hu Nar B'nai Zilpah. He was a young kid hanging around with Zilpah and Bilhah's kids. And that's a question in the Parshanim, which says, are you talking about his age or what he did? Was it talking about calling him a Nar? Was it talking about how he's acting with his brothers and what he's telling his father about them? Or is it just telling you how old he was? It makes sense to talk about his behavior because if you say he's 17, I don't need to know he's a Nar. If a 17-year-old by the definition is a Nar, it's redundant. It's like saying Good Yantav. But if it's talking about his behavior, then calling him a Nar is talking about his behavior. And maybe he was able to see the future. In fact, it's really interesting. Maybe he's called a Nar because he had prophetic dreams. It's another possibility. Okay, almost like what you said before, calling someone a nar when it's not necessary might mean there's someone's going to be a prophet one of these. He's going to be something prophetic about his life. Okay, let's get back now to Shmuel. I guess it's late already. I'm not going to get to Tehillim 107 again, am I? Let's go back to, okay, Shmuel the prophet. Now, here's important. Okay, I'm sorry, we know he's a prophet. That's easy. It's not the first prophecy. We did this 2 weeks ago as well. His first prophecy is about the fall of Beit Eli. And what's going to happen to Shiloh. Remember? God's going to judge his house. See the word shofet here meaning be judgmental. Okay. That was the sins of Bnei Eli. Okay. And remember, their sin won't be forgiven. And then we're told, and the most important line, that we talked about in detail, that Shmuel is trusted, right? As opposed to Bnei Eli, who are corrupt, and therefore the people lose their faith and trust in the priesthood, and going to Shiloh because of the corruption of the rabbinate. Now we finally have someone working in the rabbinate who's becoming popular in the eyes of God, but also in the eyes of the people. And now he's someone representing God, and he's a Navi Hashem that people look up to from Dan to Beersheba. Those are the borders of where the Jewish people live. Now, why is Shmuel called a shofet? Got a question? Okay. We have 10 minutes left. Why is he called a shofet? He's called a shofet in the book. Let's see what he does. Can someone name me a shofet from Sefer Shoftim who judges the people on a day-to-day basis?
Presumably Devorah.
Yeah. Now, we're told that he shofeted. We're told about it. Is there any stories about them doing mishpat?
No.
Is there any story about them rebuking the people? Bringing them back towards God? What do all the shoftim have in common in Sefer Shoftim? They're all Mosheim, correct? They're all in the cycle. Everyone who's called a shofet in Sefer Shoftim is a Moshiach. And I told you, calling them shoftim is ironic, as part of this set, part of the irony of the book. But even though Devorah is mentioned inside that she shofeted, but the story we hear about Devorah, we have 2-3 chapters on Devorah, 2 chapter 3. We have a long story about Devorah and her song, but we're told about her battle and the Yeshua she brings, and the songs she sings. We're not told about the fact that she's a judge. She's known for the delivery of Israel from their enemy, because that's what all the judges do. They're Mosheim. The only shofet who's going to judge the people and bring them in tshuva is going to be Shmuel, and that's chapter 7. Got it? Now, the Aron comes back. We'll do that story later on. The Aron comes back to Kiryat Yarim. That's near Tel Stone today. And then from the time the Aron comes back in Kiryat Yarim, there's some 20 years. We're not sure where they counted 20 years from. And Bnei Yisrael begin to return to God. There's a beginning of tshuva. Right? The people begin, like this terrible event happens. The destruction of Shiloh was a terrible event. It was like a shakeup. Like it was so bad. What happened? The people realized how bad it was, and they start saying, you know what? Maybe we need a unity government. Maybe we have to gather. No, sometimes you have an event that people do something really terrible and bad, and it gets so bad that finally it's going to get really bad, and then finally people wake up. We have to do something about it. So Vayinahu is anamanapia. It's like Nahu v'ni. It's like, the word is anamanapia means they're kvetching. They're crying out to God, or they're crying out in general, but they're crying out towards God again. And now Shmuel's going to capitalize on those feelings of repentance. We've got to do something and try to make it better. Listen carefully. This is the highlight of Shmuel's career, in my opinion. Okay. Shmuel read Sefer Dvarim, didn't he? Remember, if you're returning to God with your whole heart, if this isn't phony tshuva, this is real tshuva, then hasiru et necham mitochachem b'ashtorot v'chiru levavchem al Hashem v'ivdu levado v'etzel etchem yad plishtim. What do we see? It's called syncretism, where we're returning to our God, but we still follow other gods. But I like to say we can filter fish Friday night, we go to the movie Saturday night. Just joking, but the idea that you're living in 2 different cultures. So they're Jewish, they have their God, but they also follow customs of other gods. So he says, if you really want to do tshuva, get rid of your foreign culture. The Elohim Nichar Mitochachem and Yashtorot, whatever those gods were. Okay? And Bechinu Levachem, prepare your hearts towards God and serve him alone. And then he can save you from the Plishtim. Okay? Remember the Plishtim were the arch enemy at the time. There's the ones who destroyed Shiloh and took the Aron. In other words, the first thing Shmuel was able to do was to channel their feelings of repentance to make it uniquely serving God. That's stage one. Stage two. He's going to make a national gathering in Mitzpah. The last time Am Yisrael gathered in Mitzpah was to go to civil war against Binyamin. Shmuel is gathering the people now in Mitzpah to do tshuva. Later will gather in Mitzpah to establish the kingdom. This is the first time we find a leader doing anything of this caliber, isn't it? In other words, what's Shmuel doing? He's gathering the people. He's taking the military trouble of what happened in the destruction of Shiloh, the sad political and economic and security state of the people, which caused the people to be in questioning, maybe we're doing something wrong. He's able to capitalize on those feelings, get them to serve God more sincerely, and now he's going to get them not just to not serve other gods, but to serve our God properly, and they do a proper tshuva gathering. And now the next line is key. Vayishpot Shmuel et bnei Yisrael b'mitzvah. What do we finally find? A shofet doing shvita. What's Vayishpot mean? Right? He's being judgmental. Didn't we talk about this word when we learned Sefer Shoftim? Remember I told you, if I go back to Sefer Bereshit for a minute, remember when you're judgmental of somebody else, we saw that in share screen, in Sefer Bereshit. In the story of Stone, remember Lot tells the people, remember I stood to give you my daughters, to give you the men. Here. They say, what do you call it? Lot tells the people, okay? And they tell them, and Lot says, remember the way I explained it, I stood to give you my two daughters and give you these men. It's important to be my guests, okay? And they get angry for giving them. Lot gives them musr, gives them rebuke. They said, Lord, stand back, get out of the way. Right? You're new in town. You're a temporary resident in town. You just came here to live, and you're being judgmental of us. See, my point is, they're angry at Lot for telling them how to run their city. Lot is censoring them, rebuking them for the way they're treating guests, and they don't like the fact that Lot's telling them how to behave. And now we're going to make you, we'll be evil to you, worse than them. They want to break down the door and kick Lot out of town as well, and then everyone knows the end of the story. But I'm just bringing an example of lishpot can be to be judgmental of someone. And one other example, actually go back to Sefer Shmuel, later on in the same place, in Sefer Shmuel, in the same book of Shmuel. Where are we? Sefer Shmuel. In chapter 12, that was Haftarah not too long ago. Where are we? Sefer Shmuel. In chapter 12, it should be when they finally anoint the king, and I can't get it up. Here we go. In Shmuel chapter 12, here, they gather the people. Moshe gathers the people together, and it says, "Vatay yatzvu." Okay. That this was the cycle of Sefer Shoftim. But I'm going to be judgmental of you of all your behavior. Now, why am I making such a big deal about it? Because I think this explains why the Shoftim are called Shoftim. That's part of the irony of our Sefer Shoftim. And the only real Shofet is Shmuel, who's not in Sefer Shoftim. You follow? Okay. If I'm looking for the ideal Shofet, and that was the purpose of the whole share. Right? Shmuel was the shofet par excellence, because what does he do? He judges the people. He's judgmental of their behavior. He leads them. He guides them. he's the first leader to get rid of the idol worship and bring the people back towards proper service of God. He does it slowly, carefully. He capitalizes on the political situation they're in and the security situation they're in, and he slowly gets them to serve God, but he's trustworthy, he's honest, he's straight, he's a leader, and he gathers the people when they're ready and teaches them, and we have a fast day, we have repentance, they say chatanu, there's something symbolic, remember shifchi chamayim libech, the shivat mayim, remember v'sapta mayim v'sasam yimana Yeshua, that idea we have by the nisuch hamayim and Sukkot. So the I think you have it also in I think it's in Isaiah chapter 12, if I'm not mistaken. You have but Shmuel is the ideal shofet because he finally leads the people towards God, and he's judgmental of their behavior and judging them, saying God's right and you're wrong, which is the underlying theme of Sefer Shmuel. Remember, we'll get back to that next week, where he's telling the people the reason why things go bad because you've left God, and if you want God on your side to help you, a king's not enough. You have to follow God. God tells them they need a king anyhow, but that was we'll return to that topic when we talked about why they need a king, why Shmuel thinks it's a bad idea. Like God says, it's a good idea. But I finally found a shofet who's a real shofet who judges the people. Now, the most amazing thing is what happens. Shmuel begins as a shofet, and then by accident, he becomes a military leader. Why? The plishtim here, that the people gathering the mitzvah, which they see as a sign of war, they don't realize they're davening, because the mitzvah is a place you gather for war. Last time they gathered for their war against Binyamin, but mitzvah is a gathering place for all the tribes. It's not too far. If you know where mitzvah is, it's right near Ramallah. In fact, it's identified. Tel Natzvah, right in the middle of Ramallah. It's right at the end of Emek Hayalon. And if you want to go to the land of Plishtim, Emek Hayalon, Highway 443 is the way to go. So the Plishtim see the gathering in mitzvah. Yudah Maccabi does the same thing when he goes to war against the Greeks who were in Emek Hayalon, in where Park Canada is today. And so they gather mitzvah, and therefore the Plishtim think we're going to war. And that's the war, we won't talk about the war. They win the war thanks to Shmuel's help. Shmuel davens for them. We win the war thanks to Shmuel's prayer. When the battle's over, Shmuel takes a rock and thanking God, and he puts it between the mitzvah and between the shem, whatever that is, and he calls the place Even Ezer. And we have a whole chelek in Shulchan Aruch named after this thing that's wordplay. Even Ezer, remember? Ezer Kenegdo. So all the laws about marriage laws and divorce laws, the section in Shulchan Aruch called, in the Jewish law book called Even Ezer, when the Torah divided the 4 pillars. But the name comes from here. The name because it's out of context, but Even Ezer. To this point, God helped us. And the Plishtim surrender. They don't talk Israel. They don't attack Israel again in their land. And then God was with us, saving us from the Plishtim, the time of Shmuel. So even though Shmuel began as a real shofet, he brought Yeshua in a backhanded way, and he's almost the opposite of all the other shoftim. The other shoftim only brought Yeshua. Shmuel is a shofet who really judges the people, and he also brings Yeshua. And we got our cities back. We'll deal with the politics later on. If you have classes with Shuli, I'm sure she talked about Ekron. Did Shuli ever give a class on Ekron and the Plishtim cities on the series? I don't know if you guys go to Shuli's class, but she's an expert on Plishti culture in the Shvela. Okay, now we end the shir with the end of the unit. It's not just a summary; it's the key point. And as opposed to other leaders, he's going to make the rounds. He's going to go to the people. He doesn't wait for people to come to him. He's much more proactive. And he goes, does the rounds. His center is going to be in Mitzvah, but he goes around to Beit El and Gilgal and Mitzvah, and then he returns back. And center will be in Ramah, in Har Ephraim, but he also goes all around Binyamin. And he judges Israel, all these different places. And we summarize, he's Shofetit Yisrael. And remember, building his back is calling out in God's name. He makes a name for God, means he builds his back, probably means they have Shlamim, but he brings the people back to God. And that's why that was my introduction to Shmuel the Shofet. And calling Shmuel Shofet, that's his real title. He doesn't predict the future, remember? He's more Shofet than a Navi. Of course, he's going to set up the kingdom. But what makes Shmuel great is he leads the people, he's judgmental of them, guides their behavior, and leads them. And he's the turnaround because Tfilat Chana gets the things moving. But Shmuel is the leader who turns Am Yisrael around and gets us going in the right direction. It's going to be a rocky journey till we get the Malchut David established with a lot of civil wars and trouble. But ultimately, It's Shmuel's leadership that gets the people back in the right direction. Okay, I'll take questions now. But I hope, let me see. Vaishpot Yisrael Shoftim, very good. In 310, oh, very good. Arnie, but then other times we're told he was Shofet. Israel. Okay. So again, to summarize, I wanted to simply establish this week what's important about Shmuel the Shofet. Bli Neder, next week, I'll dedicate the class to Tilim 107. And Tilim is the background to understand Shmuel. I'll give a class on Tilim about Bnei Asaf because it's Ben Azmanim. So I'll have a Tilim class, and then we'll continue with Sefer Shmuel the week before Rosh Chodesh Elul. And we'll talk about Shmuel's Tshuva and the Aron, etc. It'll fit in nicely. So next week, Bli Neder, I'll do Tilim. Tilim is a background to understand Sefer Shmuel, and the Mizmorim to reflect Sefer Shmuel in this transition, and then we'll get to Sefer Shmuel itself and the units. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you talked before about the Levites were hired as Kohanim in the Bamot, right? If I understood you correctly.
They probably function in that way.
So that puts what Yeravam did in a new light. He was doing something when he established his two Bamot, not to God in Dan and wherever.
Yeah.
That he was doing something that they were used to. You call on the Levites, you hire them.
Yeah. So let me show you in what you're talking about is in Divrei Yamim. Let me get my memory straight. That's going to be in chapter probably 11, maybe 12, 13, maybe. Let's see. No. Shmuel, but two Divrei Yamim. Let's try here. That's not there. Yerovam. He builds the Mikdash. Give me a second. No, after that, maybe 9. No, 10. Okay. Yeah, Rechavam. I'll get there in a minute. Yerovam, 1 second. Okay, probably the next chapter. Chapter 11. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Chapter 11 we are. What did I say? Chapter 11, verse 13. Okay. V'kohanim v'halvim asher b'chol Yisrael yityatzvu alav b'kol gvulam. Got it? They came to Rechavam. They left Yerovam. Ki yazvu halavim et migroshem v'achuzatam v'echud Yehuda Yerushalayim. Why? Ki znicham Yerovam uvanav mechayin Hashem. Vayamed lo kohanim lebamot v'lasirim v'lagalim asher asa. V'achrei mikol shiftei Yisrael הנותנים את לבבם לבקש השם על ישראל, באו ירושלים לזבוח להשם על יהבתם. And basically, Yerovam opened up the Avodat Hashem in Beit El, anyone who wanted. And of course, in Divrei Yamim, we're sarcastically making fun of what he did. But Yerovam was claiming he's returning to the original plan, and that he says the Kohanim are corrupt, Jerusalem is corrupt. We don't need Kohanim. We can go back to Avodah. Anyone can become a Kohen. And therefore the Kohanim and Levim who lost their status because of what Yerovam did in Beit El, they go to Yehuda where they can be supported, and they'll follow the Mikdash properly. So that change you can find here. You see what you're talking about from Divrei Yamim. Okay, one other question. Okay, thank you. Okay, anyway, thanks so much, everybody, and everyone have a good week and enjoy summer. Hopefully you have some quiet. Any announcements, Rabbi Jay?
No, thank you, Rabbi. I was just going to announce, our classes this week. There is no class tomorrow. That's the only day this week there's no class, but we'll make it up with the doubleheader on Tuesday. Rabbi Debo continues his series on sexuality in the Torah this week, gender and creation. And Rabbi Shulman was continuing his class on Sefer Daniel at 1 p.m. Wednesday, Rabbi Blau gets part 3 of his series on Agadah. This week is the relationship between Agadah and Halakha. Thursday, a Parsha Shir. Friday, the Shir on the Siddur. So many opportunities to learn, even Ben Azmanim. So, as Rabbi Leibtag likes to say, and okay, I want to wish everybody a wonderful week, And as I say, we are in the process of putting together our Elul Zman, and I mentioned before, but I do mean it seriously. Some of our speakers have come through ideas from some of our participants. So I'm always, there are lots of people out there who I don't know of, I haven't heard of. So if you want to recommend somebody, please do. Maybe it will work, won't work, or work in 6 months. But it's always, we greatly appreciate ideas and any suggestions you have about anything. But that's just one sort of concrete area. And I think that's it. Enjoy Sunday, enjoy the warm weather. Post Tisha B'Av. Aren't people supposed to away on Shabbos Nachamu? Isn't that like the minhag? I don't know. We were home this week. I can't complain. But no, I thought Shabbos Nachamu was like that's like a singles weekend. No, is that the whole thing? Tu B'Av.
I have a free
I mentioned
vacation.
yesterday in my share, Tu B'Av is the most neglected holiday, of course, in the Jewish calendar. And I'm waiting for a bold rabbi to get up in shul and announce that this year on Yom Kippur, we're going to cut out some of the piyutim so we can finish early and have a 3-hour break so everybody can meet in Central Park or on Dizengoff. We can meet and the girls can go dancing as the Mishnah says we're supposed to do. It's I think we are Reform Judaism that we've taken away Tu B'Av. Okay, Rabbi, you like that idea?
I passed that stage in life.
Okay, I'm not. So there you go. I have kids still to marry off, please God, but I'm married to marry off. So I do think that would be a wonderful idea. And I'm looking for a bold rabbi to restart Tu B'Av. That got me talking about the young Israel dances, but that's a whole different story. That wasn't exactly as the Mishnah says, but I was actually, and I mentioned yesterday, so the people who come to my shir Shabbos afternoon are a little bit younger than the people, so they didn't know. I think one person there knew what the young Israel dances were. I think people here know that, of course, I don't know till when, in the 60s maybe, when it stopped. I don't know exactly when, but that young Israel, of course, used to sponsor dances, and not just the girls and the boys would dance, and it was a different world. I'm not discussing the life. It was a total. Mark Shapiro spoke about that, and I was blown away by the amount of comments that people either themselves were there. A few people mentioned their parents met at Young Israel dances. I know of when I was living in New York. We were invited out to eat when I was, a long time ago after YU, when I graduated YU, family invited us, the Haredi family, everything. And he said he met his wife at a Young Israel dance, and he's a mechutin to a famous Rosh Hashiva, but I don't want to embarrass anybody. He wasn't embarrassed. He was the one who volunteered the information. But I'm just saying his son, who was sitting at the table learning in Kola, was unbelievably embarrassed, I think. But it's a different world. Anyways, enough of me meandering along, and everybody have a wonderful weekend. Have a wonderful Tu B'Av. And that is a big issue, really. The singles issue is a huge issue in our community. And Rabbi, if you know anybody, that get going. Okay. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you.